The rain fell like silver threads, drumming steadily against the streets of the city. Neon lights flickered in puddles, painting the wet asphalt with colors that seemed unreal. Leora hurried through the narrow alleys, her coat clutched tightly around her, trying to escape the cold that seeped into her bones. She had left her small apartment earlier that evening, hoping only to get some air. But now the rain was relentless, soaking her hair and clothes within moments. Her footsteps echoed on the empty street, each one swallowed by the sound of the rain. She had no umbrella, no destination in mind. All she wanted was shelter, somewhere to be dry and safe for a few minutes. That's when she saw it. A black car parked under a flickering street lamp, the engine humming softly. It was an expensive car, its sleek surface reflecting the scattered lights. For a moment she hesitated, unsure if it was safe. But the rain was harsh and her shivers could not wait. She opened the door quietly and slipped inside, grateful for the warmth that immediately wrapped around her. The interior smelled faintly of leather and something darker she couldn't name. She sat on the passenger side trying to catch her breath when she noticed the driver. He was tall, with sharp features that seemed carved from stone. His dark hair was slightly damp from the rain, and his eyes were deep, almost black, holding a weight of something unspoken. He wore a black suit tailored perfectly, and a calm expression that made him look untouchable. Leora froze. I'm sorry, she stammered, feeling foolish. I just needed to hide from the rain. The man didn't speak immediately. Instead, he studied her with quiet intensity, like he was trying to read her thoughts. Then finally, he said in a low voice, "You're lucky I didn't lock the doors." His tone was not threatening, but there was a weight behind it that made her shiver. Thank you, she whispered, her words almost lost in the sound of the rain. The man nodded, still silent. Leora could feel his gaze on her, curious and unyielding. She looked away, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Something about him felt dangerous, yet she could not look away from the quiet strength he radiated. After a long moment, he spoke again, his voice softer this time. "You don't belong here, do you?" Leora hesitated, unsure how much to reveal. I don't belong anywhere tonight," she admitted, surprising herself. The man's lips curved slightly, almost like a shadow of a smile. "Then perhaps you are exactly where you're meant to be, at least for now." The words were strange, almost poetic, and they hung between them as the rain continued to fall. For the first time in hours, Leora felt a flicker of calm, as if being in the car had created a small, fragile sanctuary from the storm outside. Minutes passed in silence, broken only by the sound of the rain on the roof. Leora's heart began to slow, though she still felt an inexplicable tension. Finally, she dared to look at him again. You don't talk much," she observed, trying to make conversation. He shrugged slightly. "Most things are better left unsaid," he replied. His words were calm, but they carried a weight that suggested experience, pain, and perhaps loneliness. Leora found herself wanting to know more about him, though a part of her warned against it. "Why are you out in the rain?" she asked softly, trying to ignore the nervous flutter in her chest. He glanced at her briefly, and for a moment there was something unreadable in his eyes. "Some storms are not meant to be avoided," he said quietly, and then returned his attention to the road. The words puzzled her, but she did not ask for an explanation. There was something about him that made questions seem small, unimportant, almost silly. She wrapped her arms around herself, feeling the warmth from the car, and listened to the rain. Time passed differently in the car, like the world outside had stopped. Leora realized she was beginning to trust him, even though she didn't know his name or anything about him. He was dangerous, she knew that, yet there was a strange comfort in his presence. When he finally spoke again, it was with a gentleness that startled her. "You shouldn't be out here alone," he said. "Not tonight. I didn't have anywhere else to go," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "Then stay," he said simply, as if the answer were natural and unquestionable. She blinked, unsure if she had heard him correctly. "Stay?" He nodded, his eyes meeting hers for the first time with an intensity that made her breath catch.
"For a little while.
Until the storm passes." Leora hesitated, but the rain was relentless and she found herself nodding. She moved slightly closer, though she kept a small distance between them, respecting the invisible line he had set. The car smelled of warmth, rain, and something darker, almost like smoke. It was intoxicating in a way she didn't understand. She wanted to ask him who he was, but the words never came. Instead, she found herself listening to the rhythm of the rain, the hum of the engine, and the quiet strength of the man beside her. Then, without warning, the car rocked slightly as a flash of lightning illuminated the street. Leora gasped, startled, and he reached out instinctively, his hand brushing against hers. The touch was brief, yet it sent a jolt through her entire body. I'm sorry, she whispered, pulling her hand back. He didn't seem to mind. Instead, he looked at her with something softer than before, though still guarded. No need, he said. It's only the storm. The hours passed like that, a strange mixture of silence, tension, and unspoken understanding. Leora learned nothing of his world, and he revealed nothing of himself. Yet something deeper connected them, an invisible thread that neither could explain. Eventually, the storm began to subside. The rain softened into a drizzle, and the city lights reflected on the wet streets like scattered stars. Leora realized with a start that the night was far gone, and she had no idea where she would go next. The man started the car and it moved smoothly through the quiet streets. He didn't ask where she lived, didn't try to control her. Yet every glance he gave her carried a question she could not answer. Finally, the car stopped at a quiet corner near a bridge. Leora opened the door, hesitant. I should go, she said. He looked at her, eyes unreadable. Yes, he said simply. But remember, not every storm can be outrun. Some find you no matter where you hide. Leora nodded, unsure what he meant, and stepped out into the drizzle. She turned back once, catching his gaze. There was something in it, something she didn't understand yet would not forget. The next morning, she awoke in her small apartment, the events of the night already feeling like a dream. She had no way of knowing that a new life had begun, growing quietly and invisibly, tied to the man who haunted her thoughts. Meanwhile, in a high-rise office far across the city, the man Dominic sat alone, his mind restless. He had discovered something important, something that changed the rhythm of his carefully controlled life. A thought, a memory, a possibility. Something had shifted, and it unsettled him in ways he was unaccustomed to. The storm had passed, but its mark was left on both of them, one unaware, the other burdened with knowledge. And though neither could see the future, both were drawn into a story that would change everything. Days turned into weeks, and the memory of that rainy night lingered in Leora's mind like a half-forgotten dream. Sometimes, when she stood near her window and watched the rain fall again, she would think of the stranger with dark eyes, the man whose voice had been both calm and dangerous, like thunder waiting to strike. She never knew his name. He had vanished as suddenly as he appeared, leaving behind only a strange warmth and a haunting silence. But a few weeks later, Leora began to notice changes she couldn't explain. The dizziness, the faint sickness in the mornings, and the quiet flutter of realization that made her heart pound. When the truth finally sank in, she sat still for a long time, her hands pressed against her chest. She was carrying his child. At first, fear washed over her. She had no one to help her, no family nearby, no idea what kind of man he truly was. Yet beneath that fear there was also something else, an odd sense of peace, as if the life inside her was meant to be. She whispered softly, "You're the only light I have now." Meanwhile, across the city, Dominic sat in his grand office overlooking the dark skyline. To others he was known as the Mafia King, a ruler of the underworld, silent and merciless. But ever since that night he hadn't been the same. He remembered her, the way she looked frightened yet brave, how she spoke softly but without greed. She had not recognized who he was, and that had made her real. No one in his world dared to look at him like that. He told himself to forget. Yet, he couldn't. Every time it rained, he saw her reflection in the glass of his car, her voice whispering through his thoughts. Then one day his loyal advisor, Matteo, entered his office with a quiet knock. "There's news, sir," he said carefully. "About the girl you helped that night." Dominic looked up sharply. "What news?" Matteo hesitated. "She's pregnant." For a long moment, Dominic didn't speak. The words hung in the air, heavy and unreal. Then he stood slowly, his eyes darkening. "You're certain?" "Yes," Matteo said. "We confirmed it this morning. She's kept it quiet. No one knows who the father is. But we know. Dominic turned away, his expression unreadable. His heart was beating too fast, though his face showed no emotion. The world outside the glass window looked distant, blurred by falling rain. "Leave her alone," he said finally. "No one touches her. No one follows her." Matteo nodded, surprised. "Understood, sir." But Dominic was not at peace. For the first time in years, something had broken through the walls he had built. A new life, his blood, existed outside his control. Weeks passed. Leora tried to live quietly, working at a small library, hiding her growing belly under loose clothes. She spoke to no one about the father. People assumed she had made a mistake, and she let them believe it. She preferred their silence to their pity. But as months went by, she began to notice strange figures watching her, men in dark coats who seemed to disappear whenever she turned. She felt eyes on her when she walked home at night. Fear began to creep into her calm days. One evening, the rain started again. She heard footsteps behind her on the street. Her heart raced. She turned a corner and almost collided with a tall figure standing under an umbrella. It was him, Dominic. He looked the same, dark suit, sharp eyes, calm like a storm waiting to break. But this time, there was something softer in his gaze. "Why are you following me?" she whispered, her voice trembling. He didn't answer at first. He just looked at her, then at her belly, where the faint curve of life had begun to show. His jaw tightened. "I wasn't following you," he said quietly. "I was protecting you." Leora frowned, confused and frightened. "Protecting me? From what?" "From people who would use you to hurt me," he said. His voice was calm, but his eyes held a storm. "My world is not safe. And now, because of me, neither are you." Leora took a step back. "I didn't ask for your world." "I know," he said softly, "but it found you anyway." There was silence between them, filled only by the rain tapping softly against the umbrella. Then, to her surprise, Dominic held out his hand. "Come with me," he said. "I'll keep you safe." Leora looked at his hand, uncertain. Every instinct told her to run. But when she met his eyes again, she saw something she hadn't seen before. Guilt, sorrow, and something close to care. She hesitated for a long time before finally nodding. Dominic took her to one of his private estates outside the city. It was a grand place surrounded by gardens and stone walls, guarded but quiet. There, Leora found herself caught between safety and unease. He never touched her, never crossed a line, but his presence was powerful. Every glance, every word carried an invisible force. Sometimes he would appear at dinner, silent, his eyes watching her from across the table. Other times, she wouldn't see him for days. Yet slowly, something began to change. He started asking about her day, about how she felt, about the child. She saw glimpses of the man behind the title, the one who carried loneliness behind power. One night, when the electricity went out during a thunderstorm, she found him sitting by the window staring into the dark. "You could have ignored me," she said quietly. "You could have gone on with your life." Dominic turned his head slightly. "I tried," he admitted. "But some things don't let you forget. They live in you, whether you want them to or not." Leora's eyes softened. "Then maybe this is your second chance." Dominic said nothing, but a faint, almost painful smile crossed his lips. As the days passed, Leora began to see the weight he carried, the constant danger, the betrayals, the choices that had hardened him. Yet beneath all of that, she saw a man trying to make amends, even if he didn't know how. When he visited her one morning, bringing her a cup of tea, she looked at him curiously. "You don't look like a man who drinks tea," she said softly. He smiled faintly. "I don't. But you do." It was such a simple thing, yet it warmed her heart more than any promise could. But peace never lasted long in Dominic's world. One night his guards discovered an ambush planned by his enemies. They had learned about Leora and the unborn child. The rivals wanted to use her as a weapon, to bring down the king by targeting his heart. When Dominic heard the news, something inside him snapped. He gathered his men, ready for battle, but his only thought was of Leora. She was in her room when he burst in. "We have to go," he said urgently. "What's happening?" she asked, frightened. "Someone is coming," he said, "and they're not coming to talk." Before she could ask more, the sound of gunfire echoed in the distance. The estate shook as chaos unfolded outside. Dominic grabbed her hand and led her through a secret passage hidden behind the fireplace. They ran through the cold tunnels beneath the estate, their footsteps echoing. Leora's heart pounded. Not just from fear, but from the realization that he was risking everything for her. When they finally emerged into the woods behind the property, the rain began to fall again, heavy and merciless. They stopped under a tree, catching their breath. Leora looked at him, trembling. "Why are you doing this?" she asked. "Why risk everything for me?" Dominic turned to her, his face wet from the rain, his voice steady. "Because you carry the only part of me that is still pure," he said. "And I will not let the darkness take that too." Her eyes filled with tears. For a moment, neither spoke. The rain poured down, washing away the blood, the fear, and the silence that had long stood between them. By dawn, the fighting was over. Dominic's men had driven the attackers away. He was wounded but alive, and Leora stayed by his side as the doctors tended to him. When he finally opened his eyes, she was there, holding his hand. "You kept your promise," she whispered. He smiled faintly. "The storm's over. For now." Leora looked out the window where sunlight was breaking through the clouds. The world seemed new again, fragile but bright. Dominic turned his head, his voice soft and certain. "When the child is born," he said, "I'll leave the darkness behind. For both of you." Leora smiled gently, tears in her eyes. Maybe that's what fate wanted all along. Outside, the rain finally stopped, leaving behind a quiet stillness. The city was waking to a new day, and with it, a new beginning. Ending hook. Though the storm had passed, its memory remained, a reminder that even in darkness, love could take root and turn a heart of iron into something human again.